What if I were to just accept? No narratives, no judgments, just acceptance. It doesn't mean that I need to like it, just accept it. There's a freedom in that acceptance. What in your life do you wish was different? What would you change if you could, but maybe you can't? Is it a health condition, a dietary issue, a feeling you're having, an emotion, a behavior of your husband's, the attitude of your teenager, or the way they dress, the people they choose to date, the fact that she's growing up and she's developing her own opinions that are not what you wish they were? In life, we always seem to think about making changes. How can we become our favorite us, have a better life, make things different, improve ourselves, improve our families, our body, our lives, get jobs that make us happier, find hobbies that are more fulfilling, let go of toxic relationships and build healthy ones? But the things that often really impact our happiness, the things that get us deep down in our souls, are the things that we can't do anything about. It's just the way it is. We make ourselves crazy sometimes, projecting those things onto ourselves, when in fact, it's not us at all. It's the genetic makeup of our bodies, or our emotional response, or the way we were raised, or his personality, or her psychological need, or whatever. It doesn't even matter, because the reality is, it's not us. It's not our fault. It's not our responsibility to change it. It's not your responsibility to change it. You cannot change it. Some things are just beyond our control. What if you let go of your attempts to control the things that are beyond your control? It doesn't mean that you need to like it. Just accept it. Hey guys, it's Jen. This is another episode of Reframing Me. Today, we're going to have a conversation about the loss and change that so many parents of teens face at some point. We're going to touch on a number of areas that I think a lot of us may even feel a bit silly being upset about. Like, am I seriously grieving stinky cleats? Or am I sad I'm not hearing a tuba in the other room? We may even feel a bit pathetic, kind of thinking, is that what it's come to? Am I only a swim mom? I must be something beyond that, right? Or even, I'm a swim mom, but she's decided she's not a swimmer anymore. So what does that make me? There's a loss there. There's grief. So this is something that's been on my mind lately. Well, okay, so that's not completely true. It's been on my mind since yesterday when it hit me, but it's more than that. We're going to expand our conversation into ambiguous loss. And that has actually something that's been on my mind lately. Because I've been thinking that I feel like I've been cheated out of at least a year. We all have. And I realize that it's like, really, Jen, you're just now realizing this? We're like 2 years past COVID. But honestly, yes. I think at first I was just happy that life was lifing again. But it's only now as I'm realizing how short the high school experience for my oldest has felt, because really, it has been short. Shorter than it was supposed to be, at least. Shorter than I feel like I was promised. I think a lot of us have finally woken up and come out of our COVID fog, and we're realizing that, you know what, we want that time back, especially for those of us with much too quickly growing teenagers. So that's kind of what we're going to have a conversation about in a roundabout way. We'll talk about grieving the end of our teens' activities, as well as helping them find their identity once that time ends too a bit. We'll talk about ambiguous loss and grieving. So we're kind of all over and yet still kind of not. Okay, so it's Saturday morning when I'm recording this, and last night was the first round of playoffs for the high school football team that my boys play on. Lord knows that I am quite cognizant of this being senior year and all of the emotional baggage that comes along with that. And yet, it was yesterday morning when it struck me that, oh my God, today could be it. It could be the last time that I ever see him play football. The last time that I watch all of these boys who he has gotten so close to, we've all gotten so close to, it could be the last time that I watch them all play. The last time that I go out onto the field to hug him, to see all of them and take their pictures, see their sweaty, dirty smiles. Well, I guess their smiles aren't sweaty and dirty, but still, It was like I knew this, but I hadn't really processed it. Like, hey, yeah, that's what the playoffs are. At any point, it can just be over. And this time, like over. I was a ball of nerves all day. I think it's the most nervous I have been for one of his games. And I'm the mom of the kicker, so I have a pretty high threshold for stress watching. Thank heavens, it was quite a blowout game. So by halftime, we were up by a lot. So a couple of the other senior moms and I were like, phew, we kicked that can down the curb at least another week, and we could enjoy the second half. But I couldn't help but look at the parents on the other side and think of all of the parents on the losing teams and all of the games last night. And it hurt my heart to think of them, because for them, that was it. Just like that. Whether it's been 4 years or 2 years or 12 years or, really, I guess doing the math, Tobias started playing sports with soccer at 3, right? You 4, yeah. So that's 14 years. 14 years of youth sports for some of them. And bam, over just like that. And I know some parents, like those parents whose kids were on the 30th seed underdog team, they were probably at least expecting it or prepared for it. But that doesn't make it easier. And I'm sure others were like, I would have been, just not processing that, hey, it could happen at any time. Like slamming the book shut on a chapter of your life. On the surface, and this doesn't need to be youth sports, I will, as a disclaimer, probably keep referring to it as youth sports because that's the perspective that I'm coming from, especially football. Football and cheer are the big things in my house. But it is the exact same for band parents, the dance team, cheer parents, theater parents, scouting parents. Anytime that your kids are involved in an activity that becomes all consuming of your time and energy and money and weekends and weeknights and summers, but all of the activities that we find ourselves sitting on the sidelines or up in the stands or sitting in the front row watching day after day, week after week, year after year, there comes a point when it all ends. For many, senior year is that end. But for some, it happens sooner. Whether it's because they don't make the team or they grow out of love with the sport or the activity and they just decide that they're done. But wait, you might be saying, right? But what if I'm not done? For us, like I said, 2 football players, a cheerleader, football is life right now. But Tobias played soccer from U4 all the way through the 9th grade. He was all soccer all the time. And for a long time, it was football was life. I was on a soccer mom text group for ages. These were friends. Well, friendish, I guess, in retrospect. But we would ask questions and commiserate, make plans, give rides, all of the things that sports moms do. We supported each other through the weird COVID time of, are they able to practice outside? Do they wear masks? Is soccer camp on or off because so-and-so has COVID? Who is still okay with playing and who is worried about exposure? All of that icky year. When the delayed tryouts finally happened, we texted our way through it, through the questions and the anxiety, filling out forms together until the roster came out. And 2 of our boys weren't on it, mine being one of them. Crickets. Just like that, there was never another text on that chain again. Obviously, they didn't stop communicating. I remember how I realized it one day afterwards, randomly, in those horrendous days that followed. I remember when I realized that they must have created a new text group, a text group that I wasn't a part of. Somebody probably named it, Hoggard Soccer Moms or High School Soccer or something cutesy like that. Or maybe they didn't. And I'm sure that whereas my number was no longer a part of it, I knew that others' numbers certainly took my place. Tobias was out as the now high school boys found their place on the soccer team, at the soccer team lunch table, in the soccer team hoodies. He was out. And we all feel that. We know how horrible it feels to see our kids' hearts break. We even talked about it here in the I Will Survive episode. We know how hard it is for them when they don't make a team or get the part or win an election or whatever. We even find ways to help them manage their grief, their loss, their sadness. But as is typical, of course, for moms, we often don't think about us. What about our grief, our loss, our sadness? Yes, he was out as the now high school boys found their place on the soccer team, at the soccer team lunch table, in the Hoggard soccer hoodies. But I was out too. I lost my mom place in high school too. I didn't get the soccer hoodie either. I lost my spot on the soccer mom text group. I was sad too. Only we get to be doubly sad, right? We get to have our own loss and grief, and we get to have their loss and grief. So that's super fun, right? I remember one of the worst points. Honestly, it was probably the lowest point of that year, and well, that was saying a lot for that year. But I remember him asking me in the most pathetic voice one night as I was tucking him in and promising him it would get better, telling him that I promise it will all work out. Great things are ahead. I just know it. I remember him asking me, "Do you think I can make friends in track?" And I told him, of course he could, and he would. And he did. In fact, his very best friends to this day, who practically live at our house, are from track. But before he even got to track season was when we basically dropped him off at football tryouts and ran. No, like really, my husband pretty much left him out there on the curb. I do not even know how I got him there in the first place. But he dropped him off and left the poor child who was texting me from the parking lot telling me, I don't think I really want to stay. But he did. And he went back. He went back every day. Even though he was a specialist, he never sat anything out. He showed the team that he belonged there. And they grew to not only accept him, but adore him. He found his place. He found his people. They call him Toe Money, which in my opinion is the super cutest nickname for a kicker. It's funny, not like haha funny, but more like duh funny. I never really thought about that through that whole process. I didn't really think about myself. And I say that not in a, wow, look at me, I am such a martyr. Look what a good mother I am. But I mean more like in a matter of fact, that's how it was. And any of you who have ever been in a similar situation, you know we're not martyrs. We're just moms. So you did the same thing. When it comes with the territory, we don't think about how these things impact us, how hard it is for us when we need to acclimate to a new group because of our kids. But just like he acclimated to a new group, I did it too. And now, here we are, seeing ourselves nearing the end. Thankfully, I do have my younger son. So yes, I still have my Friday nights planned for a couple more years. But it's nearing the end for him and for this group. And for many of the moms on the team, it is their last athlete or last actor or band member or whatever. It's the end of a chapter. There is a loss, a sense of grief. It's the loss of an activity, of a group of people you've grown to feel a community with, the loss of something that you share with your child, those many, many, many drives to practices or games or tournaments, the countless conversations that began with, "So how was practice?" Or when he says, "So today at practice," hearing about their successes, their struggles, their progress, their frustrations. It's something that has bound us together with each other and with our kids. Even in those times, for those people who feel like there's nothing that they're bound together with their teens with someday. These activities, they have bound us with them. It's okay to feel sad that it's ending. It's okay for us to look back and reflect. To remember those early sports years when no one really knew what to do with the ball. To think about the tears when they were too afraid to go out. We can look back and be proud. Be proud of the person they've grown up to be because of their activities. But we can also look back and feel sad. Sad that this chapter is over. Sure, we can keep in touch with the moms we've gotten to know over the years, the moms who have become our friends. But it won't be the same, huddled up in the cold or chatting in the parking lot late at night, waiting for the bus to come back. Sure, we can still have things in common and things to share with our kids, but it won't be the same. That ongoing storyline of growth and progress, technique and strategizing. And sure, they can spend time with their friends and we can spend time with them, spending time with their friends, all of these kids that we've grown to care about. But it won't be the same. That enthusiasm and electricity when they come hungry and stinky and proud after the game. And that's really the thing of it, right? It just won't be the same. And it's okay to mourn the end, mourn the loss. And it's okay for them to mourn too. And because we're the mom, we're going to need to help them through their grief while we're feeling our own. It is not uncommon at all for teenagers who have been consumed with the sport or an activity to feel a loss of identity once it ends. And we've been consumed by it too. For both of us, it's a mixture of confusion and sadness, the unknown and the uncertainty of who we are now. If they're not a football player or a cheerleader or a band member or a theater kid, who even are they? And the same for us, right? Our identities become tied to being a soccer mom or a swim mom or a dance mom, and then we're not. Often, I think it's just such a gradual thing over like 10 years or so that we don't even notice it happening. We don't realize quite how much their activity has consumed all of us. They take on the activity as who they are. They don't just play lacrosse, they are a lacrosse player. And we are lacrosse moms. So what happens when we're no longer that? Our teens have used these activities to find their community and build their identity. And let's be honest, so have we. Unfortunately, for neither them nor us, there's not a magic fix. Just like any other loss or grief, it's going to take time to heal. They're going to need to navigate who they are if they're no longer an athlete. They're going to be sad and probably a bit lost. They may be bored and they may feel or seem directionless. And as their parents, we need to be patient with them. And we need to be patient with ourselves too. We need time to navigate who we are if we're no longer the football mom or the dance mom or the band mom. Without the time-consuming activity, without the built-in friendships, what do we do with ourselves now? We need time, and perhaps we need a hobby. But mostly, we need to be allowed to grieve the end. Just remember, there is no one way to grieve. And the way that you grieve high school sports ending could be very different than the way that your teen does, and even different than your partner does. It looks different for everyone. Now, if their career ends abruptly because of an injury or the disappointment of not making a team, you were like I was. You just thought that they would be a high school soccer player, or they'd make cheer or the band. You saw yourself leading that high school parent life, working the band booster table or planning team dinners or driving them to practices. You just thought that was the life that you would have until they were cut. Or maybe until they just decided, I don't like to be on stage anymore. Or I only played baseball because you liked baseball. And so they're done. And you're done. You needed to re-examine the mom you are when you're not that mom anymore. When you're not on the soccer mom text group anymore. There's no goodbye even with that. No closure. But there's still a loss. Or maybe you really thought that they'd play in college, and for one of a million reasons, it just doesn't happen. It's okay to feel a sense of loss for what could have been or what should have been. I heard from two moms this week who had their own experiences with this. One, her son was injured during a practice and needs to wait to heal. And so she's holding her breath to see if they even make it that far in the postseason. She said she watched his practice film from the day he got hurt and she cried, wondering if it was the last time that she'd get to watch him play. And another one told me that her son was set to play doubles tennis, but the team that lost so much in the singles matches that apparently the team they were playing could just opt out of even playing the doubles. I didn't know that was a thing, and apparently neither did she. And so it meant she never got to see that last match that she was expecting. I think back to that quote unquote 2-week shutdown. Remember back in March of 2020? It was the end of all of those years my kids were together in their cute little uniforms at their Catholic school. All of the pickups where I'd watch them come out to the car together. The times that I would see the three of them in church for school mass or out on the playground at recess. And I always feel like I missed out on knowing it was the last. Seeing the last time that they were together on the playground or taking a picture the last time that they walked out of pickup together. I know the moms in the spring of 2020 sports that missed out on that last season, the last time of seeing their kids play their spring sport. I heard from a mom whose son played soccer since he could walk. He played soccer as a freshman, and then he didn't make the team as a sophomore. It broke his heart and his spirit and his love for the sport. And I can say I understand that 100%. And another one whose son had also played soccer forever, and he just got bored and he was restless and he quit as a sophomore. Both of them basically said the same thing. I thought I had 3 more years. I didn't know we were done. I wasn't done. I mean, basically, there was no goodbye, right? It's called ambiguous loss, and it's a psychological concept that has been around for like over 40 years. I teach it in my family communication class, and it is an actual loss, actual grief that we feel. The grief over what should have been, what could have been. It's a loss that occurs without any significant closure. There's a lack of resolution. Personally, I always relate it in my family comm class to my personal experience with my daughter being a preemie. She was born at 27 weeks. She was a teeny tiny little 2.5-pound thing. She spent 9 weeks in the NICU. I walked out of the hospital 12 hours after she was born without a baby, without balloons and without any fanfare, without any pictures, because I was walking out without a baby. I had 2 other babies at home that I needed to get back to take care of. I spent 63 days going back and forth between them at home and her at the hospital. I tried my best. I left the boys napping with a sitter in the parking lot at times so I could go in to feed her. I would do her kangaroo care holding while I graded papers because I was still working. I did everything I could, but like most things, it was never enough. Just like I missed out on the excitement of checking out of the hospital with her. I didn't get to give her her first bottle or her first bath or put clothes on her for the first time, or probably, honestly, a lot more things that I don't even want to think about even 15 years later here because it's still upsetting. There was no closure on my last pregnancy. It just ended abruptly. I feel like the first nearly 3 months of her life were taken from me. Her birthday isn't one I enjoy, if I'm being completely honest with you. I feel more joy on what I call her homecoming day, because her birthday, like birth space day, her birth space day was not joyful. It was scary and, well, just awful. Thank God she was a miracle and she grew big and strong and healthy. And then I faced the guilt of how could I feel any sense of grief or loss when I was so lucky to have this strong little baby. But it was a grief. It was a loss. It was an ambiguous loss. The grief of what could have been, what should have been. For those of us who have seniors this year, or really those who had seniors the last, 1, 2, 3 years, I don't know, I guess whatever it is, the last 2 at least. But for those of us and our kids too, because obviously it impacted them even more. But for us whose kids essentially lost a year of their high school experience because of COVID, we lost a year. We suffered a loss. We were supposed to have 4 years of high school. That's what history promised us, right? We were supposed to get to watch them make friends over 4 years. We were supposed to get to watch 4 years of sports and plays, homecomings, football games, all of it. We were supposed to get 4 years, right? But we didn't. We only got 3. I mean, probably more like 2 if we actually were to do all of the figuring and counting the distancing and masking and lack of activity and interaction when they did get to go back. But as I near the end of my COVID freshman's high school experience here, I can't help but feel a type of loss. These last 2 years have been so fun for him. They've been fun for us. And I can't help but think it's not fair. We only got 2 real years of this. I thought I'd have 4. And now he's going to graduate. I'm not going to see the people that I've become friends with. He is going to be forced to prematurely part ways with the friends he's only really gotten to share a high school experience with for 2 years. But are we allowed to feel sad? I mean, we're lucky, right? Things are good. But what about mad? Can we feel anger that we lost those years? I mean, I guess we can, right? But who are we mad at? It's not like we can speak to the manager. I ordered 4 years of high school and I only got 2. Tenure track professors at my university get to file for a COVID year extension, and college athletes get an extra COVID year. So I would like an extra COVID year of high school, please. I'm not sure with whom I should file that request. That, just like if your daughter quit soccer when you're not ready to be finished, or if your son was planning to play college football and then didn't, or your daughter didn't make the swim team, or your son losing the opportunity to play his final match because of injury. That collective loss that we suffered with COVID is a loss. It's an ambiguous loss, but it's a loss that can be and should still be grieved. So, okay, let's continue our conversation to talk a bit more about ambiguous loss and what it is. At its core, ambiguous loss is about a lack of resolution. There are 2 types of ambiguous loss as they relate to families. Type 1 ambiguous loss deals with a physical loss. It's when the person is physically absent but psychologically present. The most common type 1 ambiguous loss circumstances in families are things like divorce or adoption or estrangement. It can also be circumstances like deployment or incarceration. For us as parents, when our kids go away to college, that's an ambiguous loss. They're still psychologically present. You think about them, you talk with them, you make decisions with them in mind, but physically, they're not there in your life and in your home the way that they used to be. It's a loss. Type 2 is a psychological loss. Physically, the person may be present, but psychologically, they're not. Some examples of this might be when a loved one has Alzheimer's or may suffer from depression or a chronic mental illness, or they suffer from drug or alcohol addiction. Physically, yes, they're there. But psychologically, they're not who they used to be. We can also feel this when our kids change dramatically as they grow up. Like they're here physically, they're present, but you might miss the child that they used to be. Ambiguous loss is just as strong as any other type of grief that we experience. The difference with ambiguous loss, the thing that can make it more complicated, especially type 2, is that typically when we grieve something, we need closure. We like that sense of closure to help us process the grief. When someone's personality changes dramatically for whatever reason, and they become kind of unrecognizable to you, there's no closure. It can feel like it's an ongoing trauma because there's no answer or resolution. There's no closure. And because you still physically have the person in your life, people often don't even realize that you're grieving, which makes it pretty isolating. To go back to my earlier example of when my daughter was born, on the surface to others, I wasn't grieving. What should I have to grieve about? I just had a baby. I should be happy. She was thriving in the NICU. I should be happy. Well, yes, I'm happy that she's thriving, but I'm not super happy she's in the NICU. To my colleagues, I looked fine. I was back at work 2 days later. Well, what else was I going to do, right? She was 3 months early. I was mid-semester. I was back in my regular clothes. Well, when you have your baby before you reach that third trimester, you haven't really gotten that big yet. So on the outside, the grief that I was experiencing, it was unnoticeable. So if you are dealing with a parent with Alzheimer's or a spouse with a substance abuse problem or a child with severe depression, on the outside, it doesn't look like you've lost anything. They're all physically present, but psychologically, they're not who they once were. And you may very well experience grief for the person they once were. Yes, you still have them, but no, it doesn't feel like them anymore. Some of you may even be feeling this loss with your teens. If their personalities have changed so dramatically, you may absolutely miss the person who they were, and not even the little ones who would slobber all over you when they gave you 100 kisses. Maybe you miss the girl who would talk to you and go places with you, watch movies and giggle. Now you look at the sulky girl who won't leave her room and who constantly has her nose in TikTok and answers you with a grunt and an eye roll. And you think how much you miss your girl. She's right in front of you, but she's not. Or you miss the boy who was into sports and his grades, who was kind and helpful around the house. And now he has a girlfriend and new friends, and he's always off with them. And when he does come home, he's much more worried about snapping her than he is about pre-calc. He is distracted, and you feel like all you talk about when you do see him is that he needs to focus. Did you do your homework? Do you have an exam coming up? Can you clean up your bedroom? Should you be training for next season? And you hate the nag that you've become. You miss the old him. You miss being the old you with him. It's an ambiguous loss. Or your son breaks up with his long-term girlfriend who you had grown to love as a daughter. Maybe you envisioned a future with her in it. You feel that loss, that grief, what you thought would be. Or you have envisioned your daughter's future, and being a teen mom definitely wasn't part of that. You grieve for the life she should have had. The relationship you expected to have with your teens versus the relationship you have with them. The future you dreamt of versus the future that is. The end of youth sports. You grieve the activity. You grieve the friendships. You grieve your role as soccer mom, as dance mom, as cheer mom, as football mom. Your son grieves for who he was as a player. Your daughter grieves for the identity she knew as an athlete. We all grieve in different ways. So keep in mind that our mourning these losses may show up in different ways. Maybe it's anger. Maybe it's throwing yourself completely into a new area of your life. Maybe it's them withdrawing. Maybe it's a restlessness or a feeling of being unsettled that you just can't put your finger on. And it can be the feeling that you just can't move on. You're frozen. When you're left longing for what used to be or answers to questions that can't be answered, it can feel like an ongoing trauma. These couple of years out from COVID, we have changed. Our lives have changed. Our relationships have changed. The world has changed. And our kids changing normally, as kids do, coupled with these changes from the pandemic and then sprinkled with a big old dash of the loss of a year or so of our lives, it can feel like an overwhelming sense of sadness that you just can't put your finger on. You may even find yourself longing for the way that things used to be, like in the before times. That normalcy that you know will never be normal again because it doesn't exist. And yes, you can totally argue that it wouldn't have existed now anyways because our kids were going to grow up regardless. Of course, 100%. In our heads, that's probably totally logical. But when it's blended with the other feelings of loss, it can be a lot. But no, you are not alone. Just like I never got that last picture or even noted or appreciated the last time my kids came out of St. Mark and to me in the pickup line, the last time I sat in school mass and could spot each one of us. None of us got any closure on our old way of life. So it is completely normal and understandable to experience grief for anything that we feel like we lost. So how do we cope with ambiguous loss? Well, just like so many things that we talk about here, I think the biggest thing is to realize that what you're feeling is actually a thing. Putting a name to how you're feeling and realizing that it's not just you. It's actually totally normal and common and is a huge thing. Often, when we can finally put a label on something, we can begin healing. Second, look for the good. Be grateful for what is. It doesn't mean that you need to be toxically positive or not acknowledge your sadness, but try to see the good within. What growth or progress, opportunities or relationships, what good things exist because life changed? Try to start looking for opportunities to create new meaning. Third, get involved in other areas. Find new things that you enjoy. Appreciate new opportunities or avenues that exist. Maybe even things you kind of have always wanted to do, but couldn't before because of all of your commitments. For me, I've told myself for years that once my kids are off in college and I have more me time, I'm going to play tennis and golf again. Two things that I really enjoy, but haven't been a priority to me enough to actually, do them. There are only so many hours in the day, for heaven's sake. And once you factor in everything else, something's got to give. And for me, golf and tennis went away. So I've always said those are things I'm going to look forward to someday. Fourth, again, like so many things here, not only knowing what's going on with you is an actual thing, but even more so, knowing that you're not alone in experiencing it is so very helpful. Having others surrounding you, even if it's only in a virtual community like this. But definitely, if you can find others around you who are feeling the same way, it's why us senior moms, we bind together, right? It's why I got quite a few texts after last night's game that said some version of, phew, we got another week. And the good thing about post-pandemic ambiguous loss is that, well, we all got it. We all lost time. We all lost the before times. So there's a good chance that the people around you feel it too. Last, you can work towards acceptance. We don't need to like it, but what if we accepted it? Maybe it's not the closure we want, but to make peace with the reality that is a step towards healing. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to follow the show so that you don't miss out on any new content. If you've enjoyed this episode or the show in general, please share it with your friends. That's how we'll grow our community. Reach out to me on socials, on Instagram and TikTok. I'm at Reframing Me. And on Facebook, it's Reframing Me. And join the Facebook group, Reframing Me, the podcast community, to connect with other women who are also raising teens and rediscovering themselves. Until next time, be well, communicate, and accept what is.